Okay. You ready, Carolyn? Okay. So this story is also a folk tale, and it's called John Henry. And it's not just a folk tale, it's also a tall tale. Do you know what a tall tale is? No. Okay. A tall tale is a story that's like a little bit true, but it's a whole lot made up. So you take a little bit of something that really happened and you make it really exaggerated and exciting. So I'm going to tell you a story about John Henry. And John Henry actually was a real person. And he lived like maybe 150 years ago, a long, long time ago.
I think he was a prince.
He was very poor. And in fact, on the day that John Henry was born, there was a big storm. And people still remember what the day was like. It was dark and cloudy, maybe a little bit like today. And there was a big flash of lightning and a roll of thunder, and it felt like an earthquake. And then John Henry was born. And when he was born, his parents showed him to everybody because no one had ever seen a baby as big and strong as John Henry. And he grew so fast. By the time he was 2 years old, he was as big as a 10-year-old. And he could lift a boulder. And one day when he was 2, he picked up a hammer and he started hammering. And he never stopped hammering. He loved to hammer. And he was so strong when he was 6 years old. Who's 6 years old here? That's right. When he was 6 years old, he would carry rocks. And he would pick rocks up out of the field. And he would help clear the field so his dad could plant their field for he was a farmer. And he helped the railroad men clear the rocks out of the way of the railroad because the railroad was just being built. It was that long ago. Well, when John Henry was a little boy, that was a time when children, they had to work. They started working really early. And John Henry's family, they didn't have a lot of money, so he really did have to work. And one day, John Henry got a job helping clear the rocks for the railroad. And he could hear the railroad come through at night, and he knew that one day he wanted to work on the railroad and be a steel driver. Do you know what a steel driver is? A steel driver is a man, or a woman too. They had women who were steel drivers, and they had to clear all the rocks out of the way of the trains and put down the tracks and make space. And it didn't matter how big the rock was in the way. It could be a mountain, and they had to help clear the rock. That was their job. And John Henry was the strongest man around, and he wanted to be a steel driver. And he got his wish, and he became the strongest, fastest, best steel driver ever. He had his hammer in one hand, and he would hammer boom, boom, and he would break through that rock and make sure the railroad got through. And he, like I said, he was the biggest, strongest man you've ever heard, and he had a beautiful, deep voice. And one day he met a woman named Polly, and she was a steel driver too, and they got married, and they had a baby boy. And John Henry, he needed another job, and he got a job with the Chesapeake, Ohio Railroad. And they wanted to build a railroad over the mountains in West Virginia. Guys, have you ever been to West Virginia? I think you guys have.
Mama, have you been to West Virginia?
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Well, so John Henry was going to help them clear the railroad through West Virginia, the big mountains out there. And they did great. They were going so fast because they had John Henry. But one day, they get to Big Bend Mountain. And Big Bend Mountain, West Virginia, was so high they couldn't go over it. And it was so big they couldn't go around it. They had to go through it. And they needed a steel driver. So John Henry got his hammer, and he started hammering, and he started working. And it took 1,000 men 3 years, and they still weren't done. And one day a salesman comes, and he has this big, fancy new steam drill. And he comes to the railroad boss, and he says, guess what? I'm going to give you this, I'm going to let you try this. This steam drill, it can work as fast as 12 men. And the railroad boss, well, he was a smart guy, and he knew he had John Henry. And he said, I don't think it can work as fast as 12 men. I have one man who can beat your steam drill. And the salesman, this guy is crazy. Well, no person can beat a steam drill. So the railroad boss says, I tell you what, if my guy wins, you have to give me that steam drill for free. But if your steam drill wins, I'll pay you double for it. The salesman thought this was a great deal because he knew he was going to win. No person can beat a steam drill. And he said, all right, you're on. So the railroad boss turns to John Henry and says, John Henry, if you got to beat the steam drill, because if you don't beat the steam drill, all of your friends who work here aren't going to have a job anymore because I have a steam drill. And John Henry thought, and he said, all right, and I'll do it. I'm just a man. A man ain't nothing but a man, but all we can do is our best, and I'll do my best to beat that steam drill. So the next morning the sun rose, and John Henry kissed his wife Polly, and he kissed his baby boy, and he picked up his big hammer and he kissed it. And the competition started, and the steam drill started going, and it was drilling at the rock. And John Henry had his hammer, and he was hammering at the rock so hard he was going to beat that rock. And he was going to beat that steam drill, but the steam drill was twice as fast, and it was pulling ahead. So he called out to his friend. He said, "Throw me another hammer." So his friend throws him a hammer, and he starts hammering away, and he's hammering at that rock. Boom, 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 boom. And the drill's going, and it's still ahead. And John Henry starts going faster, and the sun is getting higher and higher in the sky. And he's hammering as fast as he can to try to catch up to that steam drill. And then the sun goes down, and it's night, and John Henry is still hammering, hammer after hammer after hammer, trying to get through the mountain ahead of that steam drill. And he catches up to the steam drill, but now it's the middle of the night. And he's so tired, but he keeps going because he's got to beat that steam drill. And he hammers and he hammers and he hammers. Just as the sun starts to rise, the mountain trembles. And the salesman is sure the mountain is going to fall down on everybody. It's an earthquake. But the people who work there, the workers, they know it's not that. They know it's John Henry. And John Henry, just as the sun rises, he breaks through the mountain. And he sees the sun rising. And the people look around and they see John Henry beat the steam drill. And a cheer rises up. And as John Henry hears that cheer and he knows he's beat the steam drill, he falls to the ground.
Why?
He died. But he beat the steam drill. And
why did he die?
because he hammered so hard that he died in order to save the steam drill and to save the jobs of everybody else. And everybody was silent. And Polly, his poor wife, looked around and she said, "Don't you stop cheering. A man is nothing but a man, but you have to promise today that you will always do your best like John Henry did to beat the steam drill." And they all cheered and cheered us up, and they promised that they would do their best every day after that to beat the steam drill.
Did they win?
They won.
So he got